This is sort of a summary of 2015 in terms of what happened the past year in the market, as well as a review of what we think will go on for 2016 for housing. 2015 surprised us a little bit in terms of the amount of activity. We thought with 2013 actually being a peak activity, it settled a little bit in 14 in terms of number of homes sold. We thought that we were seeing, therefore, a settling in that burst of activity and demand that came out of the recession. It picked up again. We think that was in many cases related to the fact that homeowners had equity, and they finally were getting up close to, in many cases, equal to 2005 and 6 peak values. Overall, Case-Shiller shows that we're about 85, 87% back to peak, but in some markets we're actually there. So, and in fact, in Michigan, about 90% of homeowners have equity right now, which generates more activity, releases those sellers that have been waiting. I think what happened was those sellers released because inventories did rise in 2015, and that created more buyers too. Each seller is also a buyer for the most part. So we saw a rise in activity. So what do we expect in 2016? Well, probably more of the same. I think from a national level, a lot of the national economists are predicting home sales rising 3 or 4%. I think in Michigan, Southeast Michigan, Northwest Michigan, we think that the market won't be quite that robust. We're sort of thinking maybe even a slight decline, 1% or so number of homes, maybe up to 2% increase. And the reason is because we've led the recovery in Michigan, and we think that we're maybe a little ahead of the curve in demand and activity. But I think if we're wrong, as we said in prior months, we're probably wrong being too pessimistic versus too optimistic. So we think that in general, if you look at what's going on in 2016, we're going into the market with pretty good activity, although you have to be a little bit cautious because November and December sales throughout the state of Michigan were very strong as far as new contracts written. We think that was mainly weather related, because we're comparing to last year, and last year, of course, had in the prior 2 winters had some strong weather issues. So we don't want to get too optimistic. We think, in fact, that may have borrowed some sales from January, February, March, or maybe even to the spring a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the spring being strong but not as robust. Again, that's a shift of weather or a shift of temporary issues. That's not a long-term issue. But we do expect inventories to rise throughout 2016. Therefore, we expect home values to rise, but not as much as last year or the year before, and probably following the same trend where if you're under $250,000, you'll see decent appreciation rates, maybe 3 to 5%. At $250,000 to $500,000 level, you're probably going to see appreciation rates in the 2 to 3%. And over $500,000, it probably is a good chance it could be flat to just a slight rise, and in some markets even a slight decline. And we've seen some of those declines this year or past year in 2015. But we think that that's, again, temporary. That's a supply and demand balancing issue. Last year was the beginning of a supply imbalance. We think this year there'll be a little bit more of that, whereas in 2012 and 13 and into 14 we had a demand imbalance. And those things, as we said before, recessions and recoveries don't go in a straight line. They roll a little bit, and we're seeing that roll right now. We'll probably see that in 2016 as well. But in general, the general market is up and improving rather dramatically.